Okay, welcome everyone out there to the Industry Partnership ASES webinar for SHS. This is our second webinar, and today we're going to be looking at the ASES journey. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we all meet today on Aboriginal land. I'm on Gadigal country of the Eora Nation, and I'd like to acknowledge and pay my respects to traditional custodians that and elders who have come before, who are with us now, and I'd particularly like to acknowledge my Aboriginal colleagues on the panel and in the audience, and I'd also like to acknowledge those that are yet to emerge and will come after us. So just a little brief rundown of what is in store for this webinar. We're going to hear from 4 of the pilot SHS who have undertaken the ASES journey in the pilot that the industry partnership ran. So that's going to be really fantastic to hear real life experience of ASES and make it so much more tangible for the rest of the sector to really hear what wisdom those SHS have for you all. So that's going to be great. I'm just going to give a really quick IP update after those presentations. Then we're going to hear from my colleague, Aboriginal Specialist Consultant, Yatunka Gordon. So she's going to be talking all about some work that she's been undertaking to develop resources to support cultural safety and inclusivity within the SHS sector for Aboriginal clients and workers. So that's going to be really interesting. And then after that, we're going to hear quickly from Sue Sansom from the Department of Human Services in South Australia, who developed and administer over ASES. And then we'll quickly hear from James Houston, who's from BNG. And then we're going to have a Q&A session at the end, a little live Q&A. First time we've done this for the ASES webinars. So you will notice at the bottom of your screen, you have a little Q&A icon. So you can submit questions through that, that feature. And you can also vote questions up. So if you look at questions that are already being submitted, you might really agree with those, and you might then hit the thumbs up, and that will vote that question up to the top, so we'll know that's a really important question that needs to be asked. You might also see that there's a question that's really similar to a question you would like to ask, but you just needed to provide a little bit more detail. So that's why there's that comment feature, so you can add a comment to an already existing question. So we'll attempt to answer those questions at the end. I'll be facilitating and asking the panel to answer those questions. And if we don't get to all of the questions, because we have until midday, so we'll have to cut it off there, we will publish those questions and responses on our website, where this recording of the webinar will be published. And that's another note, this webinar is being recorded, so it will be available in the future for you to rewatch or to send to your colleagues who couldn't make it today. Okay, so without further ado, I would like to now introduce Michelle Ackerman from YP Space, the first of our pilot orgs to present to you today on their experience of ASES. Take it away, Michelle.
So I'm Michelle Ackerman. I'm the Operations Manager of YP Space, and before I'd start, I'd just like to acknowledge the Biripi and Dunghutti people. They're on my country. So a little bit of background information about YP Space. We are a very small youth specialist SHS and HIAP provider on the north coast of New South Wales. And when I say small, I mean very small. We have a management team of 2. We have 21 full-time equivalent staff in the SHS program and HIAP program. Our primary focus on our services are outreach services, as well as our 2 24/7 crisis accommodation services. And we have 4 TH properties across Kempsey, Port Macquarie. We have a skills-based board of governance. We've been in operation for 35 years, and our other accreditations are primarily the statutory out-of-home care, which we underwent about 2 years previous to ASES. So our process is probably different to a lot of the larger organisations. If you're a small organisation, you'll probably get a better context from YP Space's experience. So for us, the way that we started, and because we were part of the pilot, we had a very small time frame, as did everyone. So we had a year from go to woe to complete the entire process. So we tried to be as systematic as we possibly could during the pilot time frame. So we started off by doing a complete organisational scan against the ASES evidence guide. And in that, it gave us a really good understanding of where we were and what some of the gaps were. So from there, we then identified what those gaps were and the things that we potentially already had in place but just needed improvements in. So that then equated to our implementation plan. So our implementation plan, as I said, we attempted to be really quite systematic in that, and we worked through each of the standards and the 98 requirements, and we tried to give ourselves a month each standard to complete all the work under there. So that was primarily led by myself and the CEO. But we obviously involve staff in those processes as well. So it was very, very time intensive and resource intensive in terms of the CEO and my time, because we were unable to go offline during that period of time. But the implementation plan gave us a really clear structure in terms of doing that. We also developed a risk management plan for the ASES process itself, just to make sure that we had all the risks identified and what could possibly impact us in being able to achieve that in that time frame. The ASES process was part of every board of governance meeting that was held, and it was also part of every team meeting that we held, so that the staff were always completely aware. And during that process, when we started mapping our evidence, we used the BNG unmapped version of that. So for us, the key frameworks is basically risk management and compliance, and everything that you do in the ASES space needs to be based and come from a lens of risk management and compliance. So you must be able to demonstrate those improvements and those system links back to risk management and compliance. The staff interviews, the board interviews, everything about the assessment process really hinged on us being able to demonstrate that evidence. So in terms of compliance to risk, we have obviously really comprehensive risk management plans, business continuity plans, strategic and operational plans. Communication plan was a really big one. Our asset management plan and OH&S plans are obviously part of that risk management process as well. What was really important as well was to link all the decisions made across the agency back to really strong business cases that were, again, based on risk management and compliance. It's the same as continuous quality improvement. So that is also another key focus that you need to have across all the systems that you're working through. And you need to be able to demonstrate the movement that you've had in terms of that. So through audits, through reports, through good, strong quality evidence. Tracking those improvements and communicating them internally are also and externally is also really important. So making sure that you've again got good strong evidence to show how you're communicating your outcomes, but also your process to your staff as well as outside of your organisation. Consistencies in your policies and procedures is also really important as well, and being able to demonstrate which policy and procedures link back to your ASES standards, and collaboration across all of that. So not only just for the assessment process, but to be able to demonstrate how that is across your entire organisation in terms of meeting those standards is also really important. Our biggest challenges were obviously the human resources. As I said, we're a very small team, so having the management team being able to lead those systems developments that needed to happen was a bit of a challenge. Engaging young people in accreditation is certainly a challenge, and we tried to make that as fun as possible so that young people didn't feel like it was a burden on them, and giving them really clear information about the purpose of the accreditation process was really important. And for us in the pilot group, the time factor, only having the 12 months to get everything done, was obviously a large challenge. What worked well for us was our communication strategy. So as I said, it was on the agenda at every team meeting, every board meeting. There was consistent information exchange across our organisation at all times. So at any time anything was done around ASES, it was communicated to all staff, just to ensure their consistency and their knowledge of what was happening, so they felt part of the process as well. Our staff were really heavily involved. We delegated responsibilities to them and gave them upskilling opportunities so that they felt more motivated through that sense of ownership over the process. So that was really important for us. Engaging our assessor. So we didn't do that until we were 95% compliant with the evidence guide, or we felt that we were 95% compliant. We then engaged our assessor at that point. So our process for that was that we interviewed 3 different companies, and we made our interview very tailored to our own organisation and to young people experienced in doing ASES accreditation for youth services. And that was really important for us, that they had a really strong understanding of the youth sector. And we ended up with an absolutely fantastic one, which was just fantastic. And our young people became involved really, really quite well at the end after all the stress that went into that. As I said, we tried to make it fun, and we had multiple young people wanting to be interviewed by the ASES accreditor, which was fantastic. And we gave them lots of lead-in time so that we could, answer all their questions, and they felt comfortable in that space. But our assessor was incredibly flexible in working with the young people around that process. And what I wish I'd known, well, the first one is Sheldon, obviously, and I've got that image there because it is very process heavy, and I'm an outcomes kind of girl. And the outcomes kind of felt far and in between at sometimes. So I felt like, it was very, very process orientated. So that was a little bit frustrating. And the second image is pretty much represents the sector for me a lot of the times. There was so much work that went into the ASES accreditation process, and then kind of at the end, it was quite anticlimactic. And we had this piece of paper and we got 100% compliance first go, and I'm not quite sure what to do with that now. So it hasn't actually provided us with any new opportunities just yet, but potentially into the future, as more and more people become aware of the ASES process, that will hopefully give us all more opportunities in the sector. And that's it from me.
Thanks so much, Michelle. That was really great. That was super clear and super thorough. Really appreciate that, and I'm sure that the sector do as well. So we'll move on, and remember to be sending in your questions. If Michelle's presentation has sparked some questions, send them in and we'll get to them at the end. Michelle may have to leave as she has a prior, but we'll make sure that we follow up with Michelle if there are any questions specific to YP Space. So now I'd like to introduce Cara and Kate from B Miles, who are going to give their presentation.
Hi everybody, I'm Kate from B Miles, and before Cara starts with a presentation on PowerPoint, I'd just like to acknowledge that we are both presenting on Gadigal land and pay our respects to those people and to all Aboriginal people. So B Miles started the ASES accreditation process almost 2 years ago. So it's actually taken us close to 2 years to go through the process and do it in a way that we thought was thorough. We possibly could have done it a bit sooner, but with COVID, that threw us a bit off track in terms of our planning. We're a medium-sized organisation, so we've got one crisis service and around 20 transitional properties, and we also do quite a lot of outreach work. Our client group is women who are impacted by mental ill health, so they are also experiencing homelessness or at risk of experiencing homelessness. We are also the lead agency for the Inner City Service for Women with Complex Needs. So we've got two partner organisations that we work with. One is a service that supports women recovering from substance dependency, and another is a service that works with women who are impacted by criminal justice system. So one of those organisations already has accreditation and the other one is working towards it. I guess the most important thing for us was that we didn't have resources where there was any one person responsible. So we sort of started the process very concerned about how we were going to be able to attend to the amount of work that needed attending to while managing our own workload. So Cara will speak a bit more about how we manage that. Cara, over to you.
Thank you, Kate. So yeah, the presentation that I put together is basically to share with you the lessons through the process for us. So one of the main things, and looking at this summary slide here, one of the main things is reducing the likelihood of becoming overwhelmed, right? So if you have a look at the ASES evidence guide and the workbook, they're both over 80 pages. I think they're quite enormous and they're really, really similar. There's actually very little difference between them. So just figuring that out for a start was really important. The other thing was there's a whole lot of resources available. There was, libraries of resources and also the B&G portal. So there's all these different ways to approach the process. So my first recommendation is to make a decision on whether you will use the B&G portal or you'll use the ASES evidence guide and the workbook that goes with that. Trying to use both is not recommended. It just complicates the process and you end up with so many resources and bits of paper that it's hard to manage. So we decided to use the evidence guide and the workbook. As I said before, they're really similar. The evidence guide has examples of types of evidence that will meet the standards, and the workbook lists the standards and gives you a box to write what your evidence is. So even with those two, you could actually only use the evidence guide, go through it and tick off the evidence that you have and just write the other parts that you will add to it. Also, avoid looking at volumes of resources to begin with. The best place to start is one standard at a time and noting what your organisation is already doing to meet that standard. After you've done that, you can note the areas that require additional actions to meet the standard or that require action to collect evidence to meet the standard. And I'll talk you through a little bit about the evidence soon. One thing we did after that was to extract projects that needed to be delegated to the board, management and staff. And then we arranged regular consultations with the board and the staff in team meetings where we delegated the projects and made review dates where staff members or board members reported on their project and consulted with the rest of the team about their individual project. So ASES requires a whole of organisation approach. These are some of the examples of the projects that emerged for us. So for example, listing the acronyms and abbreviations that we use within the organisation. So that's something that emerged that we needed to do to meet the communication standard. Another project was a quarterly newsletter that was made available to staff and stakeholders. The next two things are quite important, the consumer and stakeholder consultation processes. You'll notice in the standards woven throughout are items that you need to consult your consumers about and items that you need to consult your stakeholders about. So a part of that process was to review all the standards and make a list of those consultation items. And from that point, then designing the consultation processes. So as you can see, yeah, the rest on this list were things that were delegated to individual case managers as projects. So updating our stakeholder contact list, the diversity and cultural inclusion projects were delegated to case managers too, and as well as the other things listed there. I'll talk on the last slide about the annual task list, because that's something that really emerged that helped us out a lot. And in saying this, it's important, I guess, to let you know that all of these processes actually really helped us as an organisation. We really lifted our game in a lot of ways through the process. So it was absolutely valuable to go through the ASES accreditation process. So make sure you delegate, share the load amongst the team and the board. Have staff and board members report and consult on their particular projects. Create the ASES action plan. That includes those reporting and consultation dates. Also record the evidence that needs to be gathered, and the final stage being the procurement of the ASES assessor. And similar to Michelle, we also interviewed several to find the best fit for us. In terms of gathering evidence, yeah, it's not sufficient to have a policy and procedure that says what you will do. That doesn't count as evidence. Evidence is actually actual templates or forms or minutes in meetings that actually show the implementation of the policy and procedure. So you have to make sure throughout the whole process that you're minuting things that you're doing, making sure that you've got evidence for when it comes to giving that information to the assessor. Also, this was the final point here. That was important to us because we did have a bit of a delay between a point where we were almost ready and then when we actually had the assessment. So make sure that the evidence you submit is recent, so no more than 12 months old. So making sure what you're handing over is either a live link, that way it will be the most updated version for your assessor to look at, yeah, or just ensuring that nothing's more than 1 year old. And this is, yeah, the main thing, one of the main things that emerged for us from the whole process was creating an annual business. It's similar to a business plan, but it's an annual task list that has absolutely everything on it that our organisation needs to do to meet, to attend to all of our policies and procedures and to also achieve accreditation in 3 months' time. So if we just stick to this annual task list now and make sure we're doing things as scheduled, then we'll be okay for the next round of accreditation. So yeah, I think it's about 43 pages, Kate. It's a very long list. Yeah, but it means anyone can pick it up and run the organisation if needed.
And Cara, I think it's just important to note also that annual task list includes sections every month for the board, what they need to attend to for the case management team, for the management team, so that it's actually driving the organisation every month. We're saying this is what needs to be presented at the board meeting this month on top of the other stuff, but the details for it, the task for accreditation.
Yeah, so a really important document that emerged throughout the process. So that's the end of my slides. Kate, have I missed anything out?
I don't think so. I think the key point was the task list, which took a lot of work, a lot of time to develop, but that's really what's going to guide us going forward, and it's helped us submit all the evidence. Yep.
Oh, thanks so much to both Cara and Kate there. That was really useful. I think it's definitely worth noting and thanking the pilot organisations for being the pilots and really kind of going through some of the rougher road to work out how this process is going to work best in the SHS sector in New South Wales. So working out some of that kind of frustration between using the evidence guide and the workbook and then also using the BNG portal is really valuable for the rest of the sector. So now that we've put in processes that make that a little bit easier. So thanks, pilots. I will now introduce Joe, who's going to be speaking to us from Uniting.
So yeah, this is our journey of ASES. So I'm speaking on behalf of myself and Lou, who's moved on to another role in Uniting, but is still involved with homelessness and ASES as well. So, and I would like to acknowledge that I'm talking to you today from Awabakal land in Newcastle. So, all right, what we learned on the way. Okay, so Uniting as a SHS provider, we're a bit of a mixed bag of jelly beans, really. We've got 6 contracts across 3 regions, so Central Coast, Southwest Sydney, Dubbo. So we've got regional service provision and city service provision as well. Metropolitan, we've got varying cohorts. We've got some youth-specific programs. We've got a men and families specific program. We've got a HIAP. We've got 3 refuges, and we've got a bundle of transitional properties. We've also got housing connectors, homelessness hubs, and a housing connectors program on the Central Coast that also does some assertive outreach as well. So we've got a lot of different things to consider when we started our ASES journey. So my first tip is plan, and then plan some more. Have an A plan, a B plan, right up to Z of plans, because you'll probably need all of them at some point. One of the big challenges for us as a big organisation, and I know it possibly looks a bit easier because we've got identified roles such as Lou and myself who do this kind of work. But yeah, we've also got a lot of tiers to deal with. So probably the key thing for us as a big org was trying to identify who were those stakeholders and what information did they need. And then in return, what evidence did we need from them? You know, so we had a lot of tiers. We had our board, and then the directorate, and then the managers, then our homelessness framework, which holds over all our programs, and then our local programs and coordinators on the ground in our services. So half our battle for Lou and myself in the first month or 2 was trying to identify who are we going to ask information from to meet specific requirements. You know, is that a board governance requirement that needs to go that way? Is it a management requirement that way? Is it a service delivery requirement that way? And then we had to be clear with each of those stakeholders what we wanted from them. So that was quite tricky in itself. We used the ASES evidence guide workbook, and we used SharePoint sites within our organisation so that programs could go on when they were ready and upload evidence. So each of our Southwest Sydney programs got 3 down there. They could all add evidence into their own folder when they were ready under each standard. And then we could come in from the back end and check what they'd submitted. That was super, super helpful. All right, as Michelle said and everybody said, that balance of working on ASES, regardless of your staffing structure, and the everyday challenges of service delivery are just going to be there for every service. You definitely need a centralised collection, a role, a person, but also a person who's got some authority to set some of those deadlines. We had to get out a bit of a stick occasionally for our staff to say we need this by this date. So you need to have someone who's got authority to be able to do that. If you're taking someone offline, think about the best person. Some of our programs took an admin person offline, which ordinarily I would say admin people know everything that's going on in an agency, and they certainly do. But when some of the evidence was around service delivery, they weren't necessarily the best person for that part of the evidence. So thinking particularly the standards later on that are much more service sort of forward-facing, client-facing evidence. The admin person wasn't the best person to collect those ones. So you sort of need a few people to do different parts of it. Just a bit of a heads up, your programs will probably start trying to fill in the potholes as they go. So a few of our programs slowed right down and we were like, whoa, why is your evidence to stop coming? And they went, oh, we found that we weren't doing this. So we're putting steps in place to start doing it. And it's like, no, don't do that yet. This whole process is about finding all the potholes. So go down every road every laneway, everything you have, and find all the potholes, and then we'll come up with a plan. So it was just a bit tricky because as they were finding things, they wanted to fix them. And they started down that track, but it just slowed the whole process down. So one of the other things that we did is we ran some workshops for all our programs about what's good evidence. So quantity versus quality. So what are the things that we really wanted them to, to provide, that we're going to tell the best story about how the service runs. As I said, and then we collected evidence on those tiers and then put it all together for our poor assessor. So our assessor had a big task to look at all those requirements. So we ended up with, we actually had separate workbooks for each of our programs, contracts, and then we had a workbook for the organisation. So poor Alison, our assessor, ended up with so much paperwork, but it was really the best way to be able to identify where the gaps were at service delivery level or at governance level with the organisation. So we too took a lot of planning into our site visits. So again, because we're big, we had a week of external assessment. And so one of those days was with the board members and governance and everyone in the Pitt Street. And then the other days were out at each site. We too had young people who were busting to participate, especially when we told them that we wouldn't be in the room and they could go in and tell this person who's come all the way from Adelaide all about what we do well and what we don't, and how we could do it better. And lots of young people wanted to be part of that. So that was really, really awesome. But yeah, it took a lot of planning that week, especially, like I said, we had 3 different geographical locations as well. All right, how long does it really take? So we started planning as a project group as part of the initial pilot, July 2018, so just on 2 years ago. Then Lou and I did a lot of the background work in mapping the projected timeline of what the next 18 months were going to look like and developed an implementation plan. We sort of had the end of the year, start of the year in the middle there, which, so we left it to start in January with the identifying all the levels of evidence and developing up a workbook for program level. So I think I alluded to this earlier. So when we said the programs, their evidence workbook, we grade out all the areas that were, say, 100% governance with the board, something that they didn't have to worry about. We grade all those areas out. So we wanted them to still see them, but we didn't want them to have to worry about them. And then the areas that were theirs, we gave them examples of. And again, as B. Miles just said, it's no good having a template of an induction form if there's no completed induction form for the last staff member who started. So we put in there quite specific things that we wanted them to give back to us to show that they were using all the tools and the policy and procedures of the organisation. So we had that workbook to go out to them in March. Then we followed it up with workshops at each site in April and May, and they started collecting all their evidence sort of April, May, June. And we finalised it all, I think, the first week in July of last year, sent it off to our assessor, and they came in August of last year. And as someone else, I think, said when we started in the introduction, your 6 months to meet any requirements that you need to do starts from that assessor visit. So Alison came in August, then we then had an assessor date in February, which again was over that Christmas, January break, which wasn't great timing, and that 6 months flew by, absolutely rocketed by. And it definitely was the toughest part of the whole process, because we really needed to keep on to, especially when it was other parts of the organisation that needed to remediate things. We had to keep on to them to get that done, and that was definitely a tricky part. We now too have a 3-year annual audit schedule that we're running across all our homelessness programs to gather that evidence as we go, knowing that we won't be able to use the first year's evidence 3 years later, but we're just going to get in the habit of doing that every year, so that then when it comes time for ASES, we've got those induction checklists, we've got the completed, client feedback forms. We've got all those things already gathered, so that then we can put it all together for the assessor. So, yeah, thanks. And as I said, I'm speaking on behalf of myself and Lou. Super happy to be contacted if you've got any questions about surviving ASES accreditation. Any help we can be, we're super happy to do that for anyone. So we can leave those details. So thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Again, what a thorough and useful presentation. And also thanks to all the pilot orgs for being so generous, not only presenting today, but offering support and to answer questions from the sector at any time. And just a little reminder that you've got them here today. So if you do have questions coming up, use the Q&A function to submit some questions today. So for our final presentation from a pilot organisation, I'm going to invite Danella Urquhart from Tamworth Family Support Services to present to you all.
Yeah, Ma. My name is Donella and I work at Tamworth Family Support Services as a quality coordinator. I would like to start by showing my respect by acknowledging the land, its traditional owners, elders past and present, and the youth who are the leaders of the future. Tamworth Family Support is thankful for the opportunity of working together to nurture and enrich our communities and families. The webinar today will cover a short introductory summary of Tamworth Family Support Service, Tamworth Family Support's approach to undertaking the ASES assessment and what implementation plans were put into place, engaging the assessor, the biggest challenge and what we could have done differently during the process. So Tamworth Family Support has currently 83 staff, and post-structure or restructure, we have now 6 service streams and a corporate service stream. Our funded programs support families, including those who experience crisis in their lives, domestic violence, homelessness, education programs for parents and carers, and supported playgroups. There's a listing of the programs that Tamworth Family Support currently has. So preparation for the on-site assessment. Tamworth Family Support as an organisation made the choice to seek certificate level accreditation against the whole service. The aim was to ensure that all program staff were included in the quality journey and that service provision across all programs was able to satisfy the ASES requirements. There were resources provided, one-to-one teleconferences and steering committee meetings that all assisted to provide TFSS with an understanding of the standards and what was required. ASES Certificate Level Evidence Guide is a very valuable tool that was utilised by Tamworth Family Support, and it provides examples of the types of evidence that would satisfy each requirement. Tamworth Family Support used other resources to guide our work and to complete the self-assessment workbook. Initial meetings were held with management and then with staff during team meetings. ASES was a standard item on every team meeting agenda. It was important to enlist the skills and knowledge of staff, as these are the experts working face-to-face with clients. Regular communication with teams was essential to ensure that there was a clear understanding of how to complete the workbook and what evidence was required. During the self-assessment process, to ensure that it wasn't too overwhelming, Tamworth Family Support worked through one standard requirement at a time. This process allowed us an opportunity to drill down into the areas of our day-to-day practice. We asked questions such as, were all staff aware of what to do when someone provides feedback or raises a complaint? And who's delegated to manage these? Were all staff provided with complaints procedure? Were all clients provided with a complaints procedure when they engage with the service? How do we know that? What records did we have that could demonstrate our practice? Engaging an assessor, it was important to find an assessor that had the same values as Tamworth Family Support, so that they had an understanding of the work that we do. So in July of 2019, a pre-assessment meeting and a building quality information session was completed with the board and the management team to explain the standards and the process. TFSS set ourselves a deadline, the 28th of October 2019, to have all of the evidence collated. The assessor provided an external assessment timetable. This was a very useful tool to assist with the coordination of the on-site assessment. Evidence was uploaded to the B&G portal in November of 2019, and the assessor was provided with a link to view the evidence prior to the on-site visit when it was conducted on the 25th to the 29th of November 2019. The biggest challenge for Tamworth Family Support during this period was to continue through the accreditation process on the back of a restructure and to keep staff motivated, to encourage them to keep focused on the objective, which was to achieve certificate level accreditation. What could we have done differently? Perhaps taken more time through the initial process to familiarise ourselves with the workbooks as teams. Working through one area of the standard at a time helped this. Establish the same language. A common language needs to be established at the outset so that everyone is clear, whether it's a consumer, a client, a stakeholder. Not only seeking, but establishing what supports are available throughout their journey. Asking the questions. The journey towards ASES certificate level accreditation has been a positive experience and has provided a space for TFSS to reflect more closely on the what, the how, the why. TFS's purpose is to strengthen and improve social and personal wellbeing for individual families and communities, to promote and facilitate access, equity and social justice, and to deliver services of quality and value. Thank you. If anyone has any questions or further information, please, we can be contacted on info@tfss.com.au. Thank you.
So this is going to be quite a quick little update. I don't want to overwhelm you with too much information. Today is really about hearing from the pilot orgs. A little reminder that you were required to register your indicative timeframes for completing ASES, but that deadline was extended by DCJ from the 1st of July this year to the 1st of October. So you've still got quite a long time to do that. They extended that in recognition that SHS should be focusing and prioritising service delivery during the pandemic. So in order to register your indicative timeframes, you just need to complete the ASES Process Support Needs Survey, which is a survey that the IP has put out. There's a link to it. Don't expect you to copy that down. It's available on our website. And then when you've completed that survey, you have entirely fulfilled your provider readiness activity in terms of ASES. So it's simple to do. You have until the 1st of October to do it, and that's all you need to do. You don't need to worry about the previous form that DCJ had put out. So this is a bit of a busy slide, but don't be put off by it. It's really just a screenshot of this page on our website, which just kind of really clearly goes through all of the contractual requirements, current contractual requirements in terms of ASES for SHS. That one has links to the DCJ website and the policy framework, so it's like providing all of the supportive detail of those deadline. So that's available on our website, and that page also has the link to the support needs survey, which you can use to register your indicative timeframes. So I wanted to mention that internal negotiations continue within DCJ around contracting and therefore ASES timeframes, and also around recognition of other major accreditation and their equivalents with ASES. So DCJ will announce the result of these negotiations when they're finalised. Until then, our advice remains that if your organisation holds other major accreditation, you should probably wait for a decision from DCJ before you begin ASES. starting ASES in January 2021 still gives any of these orgs, you know, plenty of time. So if a decision still hasn't been made by January next year, then maybe our advice will change. But until then, that's what we're recommending. So hold tight if you've got major accreditation, because there might be a decision from DCJ recognising the equivalence between that accreditation and ASES. So there'll be less work for you to do. So we'll look out for announcements from DCJ on that. So going on to the next page, another busy slide, sorry, another screenshot. But this is just to draw your attention to this page on our website, the resources for SHS undertaking ASES. So this, when you go to our website, you can just go to the ASES section, and then there's very clearly the resources for undertaking ASES page. So this little contractual requirements, that's just the page I was referring to before. And we've actually got plans to develop this page into a more substantive FAQ that has different sections. So we're really aiming to sort of have one place that you can go that's got very clear and accessible information on a whole different range of areas around ASES. So not just your contractual requirements, but then also how to undertake the external assessor process, how to get the reimbursement from DCJ, etc., etc. So that's in development, and if you have any suggestions for us, then please do get in touch. So watch this space. We've also got the ASES support modules here. You've probably heard us mention these before. There's 8 modules, and they were developed by an ASES specialist consultant in collaboration with the pilot organisation, the pilot SHS. So they really just detail how to go through the process. The modules don't correspond with the standards. It's not so much like that. It's that they really detail a step-by-step guide of how to go through the process, kind of distilling some of the information that the pilots have been speaking about today into step-by-step guides. So start there. It could be a really good place to get information for you. We've also got the policy and procedures manual. So this is about 100 templates that have been designed specifically for SHS undertaking ASES. As mentioned in the previous presentation, templates don't equal evidence. So they're really just a starting point for you to customize to your organisation, and then work on embedding them thoroughly into procedure and practice at your organisation. But it's a great resource to have there as a beginning point. And then we've also got the webinars page here. So that will have all of the past webinars that we've conducted, including this one, and then any information about upcoming ones. And there's some other things on this page. So it's a really great page to just know about and go and check regularly. Okay, so we're actually undertaking a website redevelopment. Our colleague Charlotte Davies is running that. So we're trying to make our website as user-friendly, accessible, easy and reliable as possible. So that'll be happening over the next few months. And if you've got any suggestions, please, we'd love to hear it. Please get in touch and let us know what you want to see there, what's annoying about the website, what resources you think are missing that we might need to develop. We'd love to hear about it. So please do be in touch. So this is how you can be in touch with us about anything really. We've got the dedicated email address and the hotline that you can call anytime with any questions or support requests for ASES, but also things like what you might want to see on the website. One final thing, we have been running dedicated support meetings for SHS undertaking ASES. So these are sort of one-on-one, round about an hour-long Zoom meetings between us, the IP accreditation support team, and whoever within your SHS wants to attend that meeting. And they're really kind of structured to try and problem solve any specific issues that you're having with ASES. So we like to have a little bit of notice on issues that you've been having, so that we have time to research a potential response and answers and information, and then we sit with you and try and work it out and try and offer best advice and see if we can help in any way during those meetings. So they have been rolled out to a number of organisations already, and we will continue to offer those to anyone who completes the support needs survey. We're offering them as to our capacity. So if you haven't heard from us yet, don't worry, we will be in touch, and we'll be doing those meetings over the next couple of years really. So don't feel rushed to jump into them early if you're just not at that point of being in the headspace to talk about ASES or have those issues that you need to discuss, but that's something that we're offering, so keep it in mind, and we hope to be able to help you in that way. Tankara, I might keep my video on just to make sure that you're ready to go.
Yep, can you hear me?
Can hear you.
I've got my video on. Hello everyone.
Hi, did you want to put your video on or you want to
No,
go?
it's all right, I don't mind.
I'll put it on. Put it on, come on, let us see your face.
Well, the camera's a bit funny, but I will put it on.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know how good the...
Okay, yep, great.
Yeah. Okay. So I'd like to acknowledge the land which I'm meeting on today. I'm at home. I'm on Wongal country here in the inner west, lovely inner west of Sydney. So I want to acknowledge that, ancestors both past and present, people living on the land, caring for the land now, and the ancestors that walk with me through the beautiful country we live in. So yeah, so basically with the ASES, I've working with in the sector with Homelessness New South Wales in developing a tool for services and organisations towards providing a culturally safe environment for their staff and people who access their services and the organisation. So I've been doing this for about, I think, 7 weeks, and I have been working closely with Mon and Lucia, but also I've used the Accord. So I'm not sure if people are familiar with the Accord, but that was something that was developed by a New South Wales Aboriginal Reference Group in November of 2007. So it's an active guide document from SHS service providers. So and that's Aboriginals that work in the sector. So basically what I've been working on is a checklist that would sit within the cultural inclusion and diversity bit of the ASES standards. And also what I didn't do, I wanted to congratulate everyone on their, you know, going through the ASES and getting through it thoroughly. It sounds like it's quite a process. So it's actually good to hear and listen to, you know, how it impacted the challenges that come up and also the stuff that was done really successfully. So yeah, that's what it is. It's a self-assessment tool for checklist, for the organisation to look at when doing the ASES. So what I sort of wanted to, so it'll be a checklist that sits, like I said, within the ASES, and I've been developing, of course, with the Accord, just around how to make your service a culturally safe place. So working towards it, because I think culturally, being culturally safe is something that that's going to be active constantly. I mean, you know, with as landscapes change and around there, and sort of as the service grows and progresses, and the clientele as well, and the people that access your services. So it's more about work, like I said, working towards a culturally safe place where your Aboriginal clients can come in and you know, be able to get their needs met around housing, and also cultural safety in regards to the workers that work in the space, so they're aware of what country they're on, but you know, the challenges that they may have themselves as workers when or I shouldn't say challenges, or the barriers that might come on, and better understanding that from an Aboriginal worldview. So yeah, it's a checklist that I've been working on, like I said, and it'll sit within the ASES. I'm just trying to sit within the ASES study, and we're hoping it's easy and people can pick up, and it will be both for the assessors and the service themselves. Listening to everyone, and I've brought this up to Lucia before, just where it would sit within. And it seems like there's a few places, and I'm thinking where it would have the most impact. The most impact in regards to working better with the Aboriginal, not only your clients, but within the community which you sit on, the lands which you sit on, and meaningful good partnerships, which I'm sure many of you have, but how you can better develop that. But it's also giving people an opportunity to look at the socio-political landscape which Aboriginal people come from when they're using their service, because we all have our different worldview of what the world looks like to us, and how colonisation has impacted Aboriginal people, and in regards to how we use services, how we support one another, and how we can better work together. So I've seen that, which I've been doing a bit of research around it as well, how the Closing the Gap, one of the things that they looked at for Closing the Gap this year was one of the targets were actually housing for 2019. So hopefully this has an impact, but it gets people thinking about what they need to look at in being culturally safe, and providing that space for their Aboriginal clients and also their Aboriginal workers.
Thanks, Yutanka. Yeah, I mean, just to clarify, because I think that it's such an important area and support to have for the sector. But just to clarify that what you're working on is a checklist of sorts,
yep,
or sort of a list that is suggestions for SHS undertaking ASES to build their cultural inclusivity and safety within their service provision.
Yes.
So it's a list of things that you might do to really kind of make sure that you're meeting not only meeting those standards, but evolving your service towards being as culturally safe and inclusive as possible, which is an ongoing process, as you mentioned. Yep. It's not a static thing. So when you say it sits within the ASES, it's more that it's a list developed to speak to the requirements in the ASES, so that yep, people can use it. It'll be available through the industry partnership. It'll be on our website, I imagine, and we'll also send it out to the sector. It'll be something that kind of makes sense with the requirements that are being asked with ASES. But generally, it's speaking to the accord, which is already in existence, which was developed by the Aboriginal reference group, so representatives from the sector, and so it's exciting that we can use ASES and the requirements for SHS to meet ASES to really kind of build on this intention and desire and importance of building cultural safety and inclusion within our services. So that's really great. So Tunk, when do you anticipate that it will be available?
Well, I'm thinking another 2 to 3 weeks it will be available. I'm sort of drafting it up at the moment, so we're hoping to have something in 2 to 3 weeks that that sits there and people can access.
Great. Okay. Well, we'll make sure that we make it really clear to the sector when it's available, and send it out there. And obviously I'm sure that you would be open for any feedback on that. If people want to get in touch, we will publish Yutanka's contact details, her email address, on our website when we publish this, and we'll have a whole section on our website about Aboriginal cultural safety and inclusion, because it is actually a reasonably significant element of the new version of ASES, the update. So that's really exciting. Thanks so much for taking the time, Yutanka. I will have you here for the panel afterwards if anyone's got any questions. But for now, that's actually quite a nice segue into talking with Sue Sansom, who is from the DHS, Department of Human Services in South Australia. As I mentioned before, Sue is, I like to refer to her as the ASES Oracle. She is part of the team that originally designed ASES and now manages ASES for the whole country. So Sue, we've invited today to just give a little update, and so that you all know her face, she's going to give a bit of an update on what's happening around the new version of ASES. Many of you know that what the ASES version that we're working on right now is 6 or 7. Those two are interchangeable because they're so similar, so it doesn't matter that you're doing 6 and 7, they're both the same essentially. But we are updating, we're in the process now of updating to version 8. So Sue's going to speak a little bit about that now. Over to you, Sue. I'll stay on.
Thank you, Lucia. Let me just first acknowledge that I'm on Ghana country. I acknowledge the people and Aboriginal people across Australia. So first of all, thank you for inviting me today. I'll try and be brief, but I am known to be so passionate and talk over my allocated 5 minutes. But I would like to congratulate all of those organisations that have spoken and Yachunga this morning, because they've all come up with some unique takeaways for even me, who's been doing it for over 16 years. So I love the way that Michelle acknowledges, well, it's a bit of an anticlimax. We haven't had an opportunity to reward or recognise. And I think in the past we've had recognition ceremonies where everyone came together and celebrated together their achievements. And so I encourage you, if there's resources to be able to do that. Obviously not in this climate, but still be able to recognise everyone's achievement and those champions as well. So we would give glass stars to the champions in each organisation. So it all depends on resources, obviously. I love the fact that Cara and Kate have gone and devised this new system to integrate their continuous improvement, because one of the challenges is actually embedding continuous improvement on an ongoing basis, not this sudden surge every 3 years. So well done to them. And I love the pothole. I've never heard of that before, Joe. Well done for coming up with a new term. I'm going to use that one. I hope you don't mind. And I think a survival pack, an ASES survival pack. What would be the contents of a survival pack? So you've got me thinking there, what do I need before I even start? I think a massage on a regular basis, green tea, meditation, all of the above. But and also just to say thank you to Yachunga, because the work that she does is very much supporting and dovetailing the new version 8. And there was one statement around outcomes, being outcome focused, and I would like to draw your attention to trust. Trust that you're working with your community, and that trust is based on credibility. It's based on the relationships that you have with your community, the integrity that you're building, and your capability. So ASES accreditation is building onto your capability, but all the other aspects of trust, that's what we're aiming for. But now I'm going to just give you a bit of some background, because I feel the sense of anxiety about, version 8. Let me just reassure you now that the structure has not changed. The structure remains the 3 categories, the 8 topics. So be reassured there. But every 4 years we go through international accreditation, and 2020 is we're going for it now. And probably mid-cycle, there's always a review. And the last time that we had any significant changes was done in 2010 and 2006. And what we've done this time is, as a result of the review and the research that was done over the last 2 years, there's been some changes to the language. There were some questions that people constantly ask me, what does this mean? What are you actually asking? And so we've gone, actually, we need to reframe that. We need to be clear, concise of what we're asking and be more explicit. So it's still asking the same thing, but in a different way. All right, so that's one thing to reassure you. There was also some duplication. So we've removed that, and that was, you know, same piece of evidence, just asking the question different ways. And go, actually, do we really need to ask that second question? Because we're already asking it in the first. So we've removed that. The other thing is legislation it's an ongoing beast, shall we say. And the Privacy Act has probably had one of the significant changes. And one of the things about the Privacy Act is cyber security. And so you'll start to see, especially because the Prime Minister made an announcement just recently about putting in greater controls around cyber security, because we're getting cyber attacked. You know, we got attacked 2 weeks ago. So it's something that you're probably already starting to work on, and we're just giving you some steps on what that should look like and what those signposts might be. So, and then the other areas is around, well, ASES has always been outcome focused, but both South Australia and New South Wales have gone down the outcome frameworks, very clear outcome frameworks. So we are dovetailing there. So you've got a very good outcome implementation guide in the New South Wales Government Department there. And we've very similar, modelled on the same. So we're asking a series of questions that step out how you are creating your service design, how you are evaluating, how you're collecting your data, how are you measuring your outcomes. So we're actually stepping that out for you. So we're quite clear there. So there's been some reordering of the standards in that section. And hopefully they're logical and sequential. You can see how one builds onto the other. Probably the most significant that Lucia already alluded to was the cultural inclusion standard, and I think that's been relabeled. Let's be upfront. It's been relabeled to be diversity and inclusion, and I think we've always historically focused on cultural awareness, and I found that not really capturing the full story, because to be culturally aware is if you're on a continuum, cultural awareness is, you know, there's self-awareness and there's cultural awareness of another person. That's just over here, but we need to build on that, and we need to build and work towards cultural capability. And to be able to do that, we need to provide the scaffolding by creating a culturally safe environment. And that's done in many ways, and it's different from state to state, it's different from country to country. So, you know, they're underpinned by a set of values. There's symbols and artefacts that people use to showcase how they're being culturally safe. There's some policies, there's training, and all of this is trying to shape and lever behavioural and social change. It's like trying to get a call to action that this is what we want to do, this is what we want to be, this is how we want to create this new world, and here's some steps along the way. So, and we will be learning, we're all learning, and this is a bit of a steep learning curve. So one of the things that will come out of it is it's still in its infancy, there are some good organisations that are well ahead of the game here, and in the future it would be good to share those stories, get those case studies in a forum like this, or actually in a room together eventually when we can. And in the past what we've done is whenever we've had a new version come out, we've had presentations done by various organisations on how they did things, what they've learned, so similar to today, and then they've gone and shared their own examples. And I think that will continue. But out of the review that we had, there were some additional recommendations that were done, and the forums, online learning modules, better practice guides. These are all the things that we are working with your industry partner to build. So I think you're well supported. You've got a fantastic industry partner. So I don't think they'll leave you in the loop. I think they'll be helping you along the way. But to give you some sense of how transition has occurred in the past, so I suppose to go from the feedback that we've received over the years, so keeping informed, having lots of communication about what are happening, a two-way communication. It's like, where are you at this point in time? And then making a decision of the way forward. Always having, so we normally give a 12-month to 18-month lead time, and we've already had 9 organisations already go through the new version, just to kind of like, kind of squeeze out the crinks, if you like. But there's going to be fact sheets that come out. There'll be examples of that will be coming out of any of the new topics that come through. Yeah, I've already said that you're well supported. So, but the cut-off date will be the 1st of July 2021. So if an organisation hasn't started yet and doesn't look like they're going to start until next year, then recommend that you start with the version 8.
I've got a very clear, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Sue, I've got a very clear slide because I anticipate that the audience might be a little bit nervous about hearing about you know, the need to do version 8 or version 6.7. So from conversations with Sue, this is what has been signed off by the DHS in terms of the new version. So if you haven't started ASES at all, or you have started but you've sort of just had a few implementation meetings with your team and you've started to think about it, but you haven't actually really gotten to the guts of the self-assessment, then we recommend that you should start version 8. So the evidence guide and the workbook is available for version 8, and you would have heard Sue just then talking through some of the main differences between the previous versions and version 8. So you can request a copy of that evidence guide and workbook from us. We'll send it to you, and it will soon be available on BNG. So that's if you haven't started at all. That means that you just don't have any time constraints in terms of the update to worry about. You can just kind of take your time with the self-assessment. If you have already significantly made progress against version 6 and 7, don't panic, you're totally fine. You just need to make sure that you have your external assessment conducted before the 1st of July 2021. So that means you've got more than 11 months now to finish your self-assessment and have that external assessment conducted. And then you can take the 6 months from your external assessment to do the quality action plan, and you can still receive your ASES accreditation against version 6 and 7. But the real cutoff is that you just need to make sure that if you're doing version 6 or 7, you need to have your external assessment done before the 1st of July 2021. So that should make it really clear. Please don't panic. Sue's here to reassure you that it's been done in South Australia many times, and services have really thrived in the transition. So don't worry. And if you need to ask any questions, then be in touch in the ways that we mentioned before. Thanks, Sue. Thanks for making yourself available. It's really great. And I'm just going to, we're close to time, and always is the way, but I'm just going to invite James Houston from BNG to speak a little bit about the how the version 8 self-assessment is being introduced to the BNG portal.
Okay, great. And hi, everyone. So maybe I should really just kick off, by following on straight from your comments and Sue's comments around version 8, because that's really the $1 million question. When's version 8 going to be in the portal? So without putting an exact date on it, I would say in the next month or two. So don't want to sort of overpromise, but it will be up there soon. Obviously, I assume, most people listening in today will be familiar with the portal and will be aware that on the back of all the work that's been undertaken by the pilot group, we've got both a mapped and an unmapped self-assessment for the Australian Service Excellence Standards. So, for version 8, we'll need to create a new mapped and new unmapped version. But a couple of important points to mention in that regard is that with the mapped self-assessment, your work that you've completed against the mapped self-assessment in the portal will carry across to version 8. So, for those that are sort of anxious about, what do I do? Should I be doing work now or later? Well, if you're doing work in the mapped self-assessment, it will carry across to version 8. As Sue explained earlier, in terms of the changes with version 8, you've still got the same fundamental structure in place with ASES certificate. It's more around, refining certain indicators and some change in terms of the wording and use of language. So the work that you do against the MAP self-assessment will still carry across in a meaningful way to the new version 8 MAP self-assessment. When it comes to the unmapped version for version 8, by virtue of the fact that if you look at the existing unmapped self-assessment that we have in the portal, it literally mirrors word for word the exact wording of each indicator and the exact sequence of all those indicators in ASES certificates. So by virtue of the fact that there's, quite a few changes in terms of the actual wording and language within version 8, what that means is that we will be doing a new unmapped self-assessment for version 8. Yes, we could have just tweaked the existing self-assessment that we have at the moment, the unmapped self-assessment, but it would have literally meant that, let's say, for example, if a particular organisation had completed its self-assessment against the unmapped version, if we just tweak that existing unmapped self-assessment, then literally everyone who'd already completed that work would need to go through and look indicator by indicator at the change in wording. So it's going to be easier just to have a completely new unmapped self-assessment, but it's still going to very closely mirror the existing unmapped self-assessment because, as Sue explained before, the fundamental structure of ASES certificates not changing. So we're here on the home page at the moment, and again, I'm assuming that most people on the webinar are familiar with the portal. There is a good explanation on the home page around mapped versus unmapped. So with the two self-assessments, for organisations who are only having to comply with ASES certificate, then I think, what's sort of come out of the pilot group is that it might make sense for them just to focus on the unmapped self-assessment. The idea of the mapped self-assessment is that as you complete your self-assessment against ASES certificate or any other set of standards, as you work against that mapped self-assessment, your answers and your evidence map across to other sets of standards where there are common requirements. So the whole idea of the mapped self-assessment in the portal is it's designed to help streamline compliance work where organisations may have to comply with multiple sets of standards. So hopefully everyone's familiar with the fact that there's a good a downloadable doc here in the portal around key considerations when you're thinking about, do I do mapped versus unmapped, without sort of going into this in too much detail because we don't have too much time. We can see just here, here's key considerations around, which version might be relevant for your organisation. Similarly, there's a short, I think it's about 5, 6, 7 minute video talking about mapped versus unmapped. On the home page here of the portal, we have Sue's official ASES certificate evidence guide. At the moment, we don't have the evidence guide for version 8 in here yet, but as soon as we have the new version 8 self-assessment in the platform, you'll be able to download that evidence guide straight off the home page here, and it will also be in the reading room of your account as well. And then once version 8's available, it will appear on your homepage, both the mapped and the unmapped self-assessments. I guess just a couple of other really quick, handy tips while we're here for those that are perhaps not so familiar with the platform, or they're using the platform for the first time. I'll just take you straight over to the right-hand side here to the help tab, because I'm not going to go through a full webinar demonstration today, but there's a short 5-minute video on how to use the platform. And there's a number of short 2 to 3 minute videos on, how do I self-assess? How do I link evidence? How do I generate my evidence pack on the back of my self-assessment work? How do I use the document library, etc.? How can I create a quality improvement plan within the portal, etc., etc.? How do I add other users? So it's worthwhile having a look at that help tab. Also the reading room. Again, we just emphasise that everyone is aware of all the content in the reading room. There are over 500 resources in terms of information sheets, policy templates, good practice guides, etc. And we also, again, have the ASES certificate evidence guide here, and version 8 will go in here as well as being on the home page. Just Lucia, just with Yatunka's presentation earlier on around that cultural competency checklist that she's working on, please keep us in touch on that, because if you think it makes sense, we could create a little addendum style self-assessment just around Yatunka's checklist. However, short or long that might be, I'll leave that up to you as to whether or not you think that makes sense. But that's certainly something we could pull together relatively quickly as well.
Great, thanks, James. That sounds really useful. We will be in touch to make it as user-friendly as possible for the sector.
Yeah, no problem. And I guess it's also important for those that are not familiar with the platform. We have over 70 different community service and health service standards in there, and things like what Yatunka's working on are natural add-ons to the platform. So it's not all around mandatory standards compliance. The idea of the platform is around, working to best practice. So if we can help streamline that and create an efficient way in which organisations can self-assess against Yatunka's checklist, or whatever the particular, best practice guidance might be, we can do that within the platform, and organisations can simply work through that, generate some nice summary reports on the back of that, and automatically create an action plan of potential gaps that you've identified. So,
yeah, the pursuit of quality.
Indeed.
Great, thank you, James. That was really helpful. So just to clarify, the version 8 self-assessment for ASES will be available on the BNG portal imminently, correct?
Yeah, we haven't got an exact date on it. The unmapped self-assessment is relatively straightforward, because it's literally just taking all the indicators and converting each indicator into a question. It's just the mapped version just takes a little bit more time to incorporate that into the platform.
Great. Well, we'll let the sector know as soon as it's available, so that everyone can start using it in the BNG portal if that's what they wish to do. Yep. We're at time. Look at the time, 12:02. I'm so sorry to everyone that we've gone over time. Sometimes that happens. There's so much to say in terms of ASES. So I don't want to hold you all back in terms of the Q&A, and we didn't get a whole lot of questions. We did get one interesting question about whether or not to undertake ASES accreditation for the whole of organisation or just for SHS programs. It is only required for SHS programs. It's really at your discretion, but you know, the only contractual requirement is that it's for SHS. But I might just see if Joe wanted to mention anything quickly about, you know, from a large organisation, about the implications in terms of the governance aspect of ASES and undertaking it. Yeah, over to you, Joe.
Yeah,
just
absolutely,
quickly.
no problem. I'm happy to talk that through with the person if they want to contact me as well. But yeah, obviously we needed to go all the way to the top as far as the board and the governance of the organisation, but we only need to do it in relation to the slice of the pie that is SHS. So we've got ageing as part of our organisation. We didn't have to worry about them, disability. They've all got their own accreditation. But yeah, we had to sort of, in relation to governance, we had to get right to the top, but only for our piece of it, if that makes sense. So.
That makes sense. Yeah, that's really helpful. And as Joe mentioned, all of the pilot organisations are so generous about being welcome for you to contact them. The webinar has been recorded, so we will send out the link to that when it's been edited, and we will get in touch. It was unfortunate poor Danella had quite a lot of tech difficulty. She had just mentioned at the beginning of the webinar that they were having some problems with their internet. So we might try and separately record her presentation and put it in the edit of the recording so that everyone can see it that way. Thank you all. It's been lovely to share this little bit of time with you. Please be in touch. We also would love you to fill out a survey to tell us how this webinar was for you so that we can improve them and make them better going forward. So the link has been sent through the chat to that survey, and we'll also email it to you. Thank you again.